Hello and welcome and good evening to the first episode of Point CounterPoint as Herald TV comes to you in a new avatar from its earlier avatar of HCN. This is going to be our first debate, and a debate which we feel is extremely important in the present circumstances. We meet this evening a couple of days after a major decision by the Prime Minister of repealing the farm laws. Of course, this is the intent. We still wait for the farm laws to be repealed. But this debate has got to do more with the entire currency of protests, and how the currency of protests is probably the most important currency in a democracy, a currency that can never get demonetized, a currency which is in the control of the people, a currency which ultimately does what other pillars of democracy may not be able to do. And with the legislature, executive, judiciary and the media under question for various acts of omission and commission, I think it is the fifth pillar, which is the people's pillar, which has become all the more important. To debate this, and we will look into issues, of course, in Goa as well, because Goa has seen a huge and a very successful history of protest and people's movements. Who can forget the massive protests against the regional plan, the recent protests against double tracking and coal, and of course the age-old protest which everybody wears as a badge of pride, is the agitation for a separate state and the official language of Konkani. We have with us three very eminent panelists to take us through this debate. First on my right is Rajendra Kakodkarji. He's a very eminent economist, activist, and somebody who has been very much a part of Goa's socio-economic political system. Next to him is Father Balmax Pereira, who of course needs no introduction, because of course he is a very well-loved priest, but he's a very sincere and a very prominent social activist who's led many causes, works also with the youth, not only of Chikali but around, and involves the youth in his form of protest, basically against injustices. And last but not the least is Stalin K. Padma, of Video Volunteers, somebody who's a human rights activist, a filmmaker, whose documentaries have won various awards. But most importantly, he runs a countrywide community movement where he's encouraged a lot of young people to become volunteer warriors, and they are warriors not with swords and knives. They are warriors with cameras and who speak out against injustices through the audiovisual medium. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for participating in this discussion. Rajendra, I'll first start with you on the point that I started with. Has protest as a currency kind of finally established itself as a very valid form of democracy?
Actually, a protest is a method to correct faulty decisions, anti-people decisions in policy making as well as projects. Why this comes up is because of the discretionary power of the ministers, who consider them as the experts in almost all the fields and have projects which are anti-people, and that forces the people to oppose because they are detrimental to the state as well as the entire environment.
Yeah, I'll just come back to me, since these are opening remarks. I'll come back to you. Father Balmax, I just throw the same question to you. And what is your sense of what's been happening? Obviously, the farm laws repeal is one key hook. But overall, if you look at the Goa situation also, would you feel that this has become a very important part, or perhaps the only part through which we can get justice?
Yes, Sujay, if we just take from that itself, when you said it is a political currency, I actually like the term. And me as a activist in Goa, environmental activist, I started believing that this has to be a currency because you have to spend more. Inflation is going on. And looking at the farmers, 15, 16 months is not less. It is a huge expenditure that they have done, a huge, they have given themselves in such a huge way that it is a currency that is facing inflation. So coming back to Goa, when we are holding on to our movement, especially the Save Mole movement, then we realize that yes, we need to spend more, not money, but more of our resources, more of our resilience, and more of our thoughts, more of our warriors, especially the media warriors with their cameras and everything. We need to spend more. So yes, it's a political currency that needs to be. We need to spend more in this, and we will win.
We'll delve more into this. Stalin, again, first round, same question, your point of view.
Well, I totally agree. I mean, it is, as you rightly said, Sujay, it is the fifth pillar, the civil society and the protest. I mean, let's remember that there is no democracy without dissent. And there are various forms of showing that dissent. I mean, opposition parties are equally important in a democracy as is the ruling party. But that's the design of democracy. Within that is civil society. And civil society expresses its dissent in various forms, right? People write, people sing, people have all kinds of expressions. And being on the road, which we call dharnas or protests, is one form. It's not a new thing. Does it have a new value today? Yes. I mean, the fact that since 2014 we have seen, we almost saw a big protest and a successful protest against the CAA. And remember, the COVID really killed it out. But otherwise, that would have been even bigger than this. Finally, we see some semblance of victory, which is why we are the sort of celebratory mode. Of course, it always had the currency, will always have the currency. Without protest, we are not a democracy.
Okay, I'll reverse the order now, so I'll come to you first in this second round. Stalin, you see, now coming back quickly to our beloved Goa and the state that we all live and work and contribute to. If you see, would you agree that compared to other states, Goa being such a small state with tightly knit communities, people know each other well, and also what happens is the distance, both the mental and the physical distance between people and the leaders and the local leaders is less. The accessibility is more. Do you see this as an advantage and a disadvantage? Advantage being that if there are injustices, do you feel that Goa is one state where the propensity to protest, to go out, to organize themselves, to spend time and resources, as Father said, Goa, kind of the ecosystem of Goa enables that to happen, because of which Goa is seen as a state which protests. Now, people who are on the other side of the protest who don't like it will say Goa sees too much of protest. And we'll come to a discussion on protest versus development and environment versus development, which is a standard argument. But do you also see that Goa lends itself to this kind of an environment?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, Goa has a lot of ingredients to make a successful protest. The recipe is just right. I mean, there are several factors to it. So you have named some of them. The high literacy rate helps. The colonial history is much longer. The big movement for statehood and the language is still very fresh. It's not too old. And we still have people who have participated in that. That makes a big difference. Goa was perhaps the only state that successfully sent back the SEZ.
Correct.
Now that should not be forgotten. That was massive. And Goa continues to show that people care for their environment, particularly environment. And this is not just in the protest life. That's Goan life. I mean, even though Goa is green, you go to any house, people still want plants around. We are touchy as a community. We feel for the environment. Some of these things naturally lend to protest. Goa is also very political, just like Tripura, West Bengal, Kerala. It's, people talk politics all the time, which is great. There are several such ingredients that make Goa. Of course, the size also matters. It is a smaller size. Yes, there is a downside. You can organize quickly. People can really rally together on issues they feel closely. You can also break them apart, because the third person is your family in some political party. Right. And that can influence you in ways. A lot of unemployment here. And unemployed youth is is like the atomic formula.
Right.
You could use that for nuclear wars. You could also use it for, like solar powered best possible alternate energy.
Father, what is your take
Yeah,
on this?
absolutely, I'll agree with what Stalin has said. And from my personal perspective, I would say I'm not happy to be an activist because I'm not one. I'm a citizen, I'm a Goan. And as Goan, I am connected to my environment. If something happens to my environment, if somebody is trying to play with my environment, that is when the activist within me has come out.
Yes.
Otherwise, today I wouldn't have been called as an activist. I don't like when people call me an activist. I'm a priest, I'm a professor, I'm a parish priest, all that is fine. But when they call me activist, why have I become an activist?
Right.
Because my land has been hurt. Because I am being cheated. And I am being cheated by the ones who are my own.
Right.
As he rightly said,
Yes.
a small state. And we know each other very well. We are affiliated one side and we are on the opposition also on the other side.
Right.
It becomes difficult because the same people whom I have to oppose happen to be my friends.
Right.
Right.
So that is where the Goans, being a small state, we are finding it difficult to fight against each other, which we never want to do. We don't want to fight against each other in this way. Inside, our inside stories might be different.
Right.
Within our homes and within our villages, that is totally different. But at this level, where the people whom we have chosen to take care of us, to give us good policies, they are cheating us, or they are being part of the cheaters who are cheating our land, who are destroying our land, then the activist within all of us has to rise up. There is no option.
We are all reluctant activists.
Yes. Yeah, but it's important. Rajan Bab, do you feel that the way Goa is, activists also get created because of the situation, and do you feel that more and more people are coming out as activists, and the activist part is coming out, as Father said, primarily because the state has failed to deliver justice, or the state continuously acts as an opponent to the people's will?
Actually, activism should not be there because it is waste of energy. But because our policy making process is faulty, it is being dumped on the people.
Right.
People are forced to do it.
Correct.
And it has become a process, productive process, to correct the policy making, what
Right.
you call as wrongs in the policy making.
Right.
Now, I was just analyzing the policy making process in the last 60 years of Goa.
Right.
First 20 years,
Yeah.
policy and project planning was left to the officers, the permanent government,
Right.
not the temporary government.
I see.
Temporary government, I mean those who are only for 5 years.
Right.
And permanent means those who are there for their entire service,
Entire service,
who are
right.
the government officers.
Correct.
In the first 20 years, 60s and 70s,
Yeah.
it is the officers who were doing project planning,
Right.
and Bandodkar used to take this to the ministers and MLAs
Right.
to only give a public face to it,
Right.
so that they fine tune it to the public interest.
Right.
But basic concept of a project or a policy is developed by those who are more intelligent, more efficient, and more educated.
Right.
Now, if you compare 12 ministers, 40 MLAs, and some 1,000 officers in the government, the leverage which you can derive from these are at least 3 to 4 times better than this set of people on all other factors. And the number is also compared to 40,000, which is 25 times. Means you can produce 100 times more through that method. After 1980s, it changed from the bureaucrat making the policy and then ministers fine-tuning it. The ministers started making the policies, and these people were relegated to just So adopting this
And
legally as
signing
well
files,
as,
correct.
yes,
And signing
just
files, yeah.
relegated to that position. And that policy which ministers used to make was based on the coteries which they had. The coteries had some interest, because of that they were doing, and then the policy was being made. Then next phase, after 2000, the third phase in the last 20 years, the role of coteries was eliminated and cronies took that place.
Right.
Business cronies took that place, and it has become a profit center for the ministry.
Absolutely.
Now they are just not ready to give up that. This thing, ministers are making the policy. It is only the bureaucrats who are just making that, make it happen.
Sure.
And these cronies are just
Yeah.
making it for profit.
Correct.
It's a business.
They
It's a
are the ones
business.
who control it.
They are the ones who control it.
Further taking off from where Rajan Bab left off, if you see the protest movements, earlier, and for instance, the statehood movement, or the language agitation movement, the language movement, and you see the movements now, one of which you are deeply involved in is the Save Mole movement and other movements. What is the fundamental difference that you see in the movements of old and the protest movements of now? And according to you, who was the enemy then and who's the enemy now? What are people protesting against?
Well, as Rajan Bab has rightly said, he has brought us from those times to now, where he has left us in the hands of the crony capitalists. And yes, the enemy has changed. I wouldn't say enemy has changed, but enemy has changed its colors, it has changed its coats, it has changed its dress. The difference at that time and this now, if we take government as our enemy, at that time the government was listening to the people. They were making mistakes, yes, but still they were ready to listen to the people. But today the enemy has changed its colors and the ways, they are not listening to the people. And for me, as an activist or as a Goan, as a Goan and as a citizen, that is more hurting, that my government is not listening to me. It is
And
not
seeing you as the enemy of
yeah,
sorts.
exactly.
Yeah, correct.
And I have been made an enemy. I have been termed as a Naxalite and terrorist and whatnot. The instruments that they had at that time perhaps were just some fear, or on the other side, offer something to the people, and the agitations would die down. Today they are using draconian laws. They are using even Section 144, NSA, UAPA. Where are we? So these draconian laws are being used nowadays against us, against the people. I'm not saying against the activists, it is used against the people. These laws were supposed to protect us actually from the enemy, that the real enemy who is outside.
Yes.
But these same laws are being used against us when we are trying to save ourselves. So that means they have changed their strategies. And if they have changed their strategies, then we also need to change the strategies. So changing our strategies would be using the new ways, for which the youth are very good. They use creative ways today. Sometimes we don't know this will come from them, it comes from them. Along with the youth, I would say India is young. Around 20% of our, or little more than 20% of our population is youth.
Right.
Which is going to rise. So, in the coming decade, India will be young India. But this young India is being ruled by old India. This young India is being ruled by the capitalist. I wouldn't say them India. I wouldn't like to call them India. But these capitalists and others who have changed their codes. So that is where the youth come forward. They use their creativity. They use the latest technology that is at hand.
Right.
They use resilience. The resilience that we have seen with the farmers this time.
Yes.
16 months and they are resilient. They are not moving from there. Even after the lies that have been given. Today's government is using lies also as an instrument to kill the movement. But our farmers, I would say, since we have taken up from the farmers, our farmers are smart, our farmers are wise, and they know that these lies are not to be trusted till it comes black and white. till these laws are really repealed. And what our leaders say, they really mean it. I'll just connect it to Goa situation.
Yes.
14th November, not this year, last year. Just before that, our activist group, the Goinso Ekvot, Goinso Awas, together had gone to the chief minister. And the request was, or a prayer was, give the children of Goa a gift, a Children's Day gift, by telling us that you are going to scrap these 3 linear projects. At that time, our chief minister surely nodded his head and sent the activist in a nice way, yes, it is going to happen. There was some positivity that was seen, but soon we came to know that it was a lie, and the lie was an instrument to tell us or to bring down our movement.
Right, sure.
Don't have protest, don't come on the roads. These were the words used by our chief minister, don't come on the roads. But these instruments that are being used against us, that means we also have to be new. And one of the new thing that has come, like farmers, we don't trust you. The trust deficit has been created, and we cannot really trust our government that they are going to do something good for us.
One quick question before I move to Stalin. You see, Father, the issue is, of course, we are talking of the ruling dispensation now, and they've been in power. The BJP has been in power from 2012 onwards up to now. But would you agree that this is the case with any ruling party of late? In the any ruling party, say from 2000 onwards or 2005 onwards, where when they are out of power, when they are in opposition, they are friends of activists and protesters. Okay, they stand shoulder to shoulder. If you see, yesterday also there was a massive protest at Old Goa against the destruction of our heritage, and you found people from virtually every other non-BJP political party there. Okay, we also know this is election year, and there are reasons for everybody to be there, which is absolutely fine. But do you feel that when the same parties come to power, they completely change and they're not with the same people? If the same issue has not been solved and an opposition party comes to power on the basis of that issue, they don't remain the same friends with the people who've been protesting and don't give justice. Do you feel this is also true?
I wouldn't go totally with it, but yes, I can agree with you on that. And yes, now these people who are there with us, when they were in government, they were on the other side. When the government was formed in Goa, BJP was held by Goa Forward Party and MGP,
Yes.
although we are not having a political debate over here. These were the same people who helped the government to bring out these laws, now which the present government likes to say it was brought by the previous government, and that is going to go on and on.
Yes, yes.
Who had brought it? Because they had brought it, that is the reason we throw them out and we brought you.
Correct.
So that you correct the things. So if you are doing the same thing, then why do we require you? Now about these people, when they are out of the government, they come shoulder shoulder to us.
Yes.
Okay, we cannot, say we don't want you.
Yeah, you can't discount
Yes.
this. Yeah, but
That is also an addition for us. But once, if, as you have said, if based on that you come to power, then also you have to remember, based on that same principle, you will come down from the power.
Right.
That is what the politicians and the political parties need to keep in mind, that it is not absolute power that they have. The power is ours. We are the people,
Very
and we are
important.
powerful.
Yes, power is
So
ours.
if we can bring down one government because of this reason, for the same reason we can bring you down. So that is why those who are coming with us, yes, if you have changed your mind, then well and good, we are happy for that. But if you are coming just to show us, then soon after election or during the election, you will know the result and you will get it.
Stalin, quick question, taking into account the farmers' protest, because historically they've been huge. I think nationally that has kind of moved many people, including me, a lot. But at the same time, the Save Mole movement, and one has seen a lot of movements in the last 20 years. One has seen the regional plan movement and the Save Mole movement. Both these actually give you goosebumps, primarily because the kind of people who are involved, the number of young people and children who are involved, and the fact that they have logged on to it in a manner which is absolutely unbelievable, and the complete age span. Somebody who's say 15 years old to somebody who's 85 years old has bought into the same movement. Okay, the 85-year-old is fighting for the 15-year-old. The 15-year-old is fighting for his own future and for the next generation that is coming. Now the issue is that in the current age, how much does technology and modern techniques help in protest movements? And since you also run a movement where you have a huge community of people doing protests in a very unique way of making films, how do these new techniques actually help, and how have these been leveraged?
I mean, it has always helped, right? I mean, let's remember that one of the things that Gandhi did for the movement is to run a newspaper. Lokmanya Tilak ran a newspaper, Ambedkar ran publications, the socialist revolution in Russia had newspapers. I mean, name me one movement, people's movement, anywhere in the world that has not used the technology at that time. They always have, because amplification of your concerns, amplification of what you stand for, what you're fighting for or against, is the need. So you would use any tool available at your disposal at that particular time in history to amplify your voices. Today, the amplification tools have changed. It's social media, and that's what we see in Mulay movement. People start doing memes and YouTube and all of that. It's not surprising. What is interesting is that the control of the earlier media, the big media as we call it, is not the same in the social media, right? Social medias are unfortunately a conglomerate and heavily centralized, like Facebook and Google and Amazon owns all of it. But at the day-to-day level, the controls are very limited. So, the shutdowns happen. Yes, we have examples of shutdowns or Twitter handles and Facebook pages, etc. But it's not as big as my access to, say, have a space in a newspaper to write or be on a panel like this. Being on a panel like this is once in a while opportunity. So not a lot of people have access on the established media, but that's not the case with the new media. So that, of course, has changed. But I would like to make one more point, taking from Rajan Babu. I mean, fantastic analysis of the difference between bureaucracy and politicians. One should remember that when BJP came to power, they had many slogans, and one slogan in the center, one slogan was Congress Mukt Bharat. Now, it is not just saying that we want to get rid of Congress. Congress represents opposition. What it meant was we want no opposition. Now, connect it with what happened early this month. Early this month, Ajit Doval, who, as we all know, comes from the IPS services, is the National Security Advisor, goes to the police academy for some function, and in his speech, he basically says that the modern day fourth generation war is on civil society. He says that, it's on record. I mean, so he considers civil society as the next threat. NHRC recently did a debate on human rights, and the debate was co-organized with the police force, and the subject, the question that was debated was, is human rights an obstacle when it comes to fight on terrorism and Naxalites? And that's your position question. Is human rights an obstacle? I mean, that's what expected from the National Human Rights Commission? So we must just see the trend here, Sujoy. There is a successful demonization and discrediting of civil society. When someone like Father Stan Swami from Jharkhand, who unfortunately gave his life in the prison, which we consider as an institutional murder by the state, he was declared to be an urban Naxal. Our friend Anand Teltumbre, he is in jail. Sujay Bharadwaj, a human rights lawyer, is in jail. Under what? Urban Naxals. Sudha is in jail because she's declared as a urban Naxal. This branding that if you don't toe my line, you would be discredited as an enemy of the state, meaning that you are garnering. So if you discredit opposition parties, what do people have? Like what Father said in the beginning, you're reluctantly getting into activism. If opposition parties played their role, there would be no need for activism by private citizens. But they discredit opposition, right? And opposition, as you rightly pointed out, when they come into power, then it is like things change, right? I mean, we have political parties coming into Goa for elections, but we need to also ask these political parties who are not, who've come into Goa, show me your record in your states. Show me your accountability record, your transparency record, your record of dealing with violence. For example, let's talk to TMC about their record on RTI. Why are there no RTI activists in Bengal that we can name of? Saket Gokhale is an RTI activist. Why aren't there RTI activists in Bengal? It's a good question. It relates to transparency and accountability. There are several questions that need to be asked. I can't be branded as a troublemaker for asking questions that need to be asked. And citizens have a right. No? My job does not end as a citizen after I put my ballot. My constitution makers told me, you have to be vigilant. They said the price of democracy is sleeplessness. You want democracy? You better be ready to be awake 24/7. You better be the watchdog. And that's what we have to be. It is like you can call it a faith or religion, you can call it your belief system. You take from Mother Earth, you give back, you protect, you nurture. Same with democracy. You take your rights, you're bound by the duties of democracy. And one of the duties is watching out for all the wrong that happens, right?
Absolutely. Rajma, talking of political parties, do you also feel that the opposition across the country, it can be any party which is not in power, do you feel that the opposition, because of its own omissions and commissions, or because of its own weaknesses, or because the opposition at times has literally surrendered to the ruling party, or because of its own weaknesses and deals that they have done, they are vulnerable to the so-called government agencies, okay, who are caged parrots, but at the same time they are used very effectively to do this. But the opposition also does not have that power to be fearless, primarily because of compromises they've made, because of which even what happens is they cannot be a strong kind of opposition voice, or they cannot do what ordinary citizens can do, because ordinary citizens are fearless. But if we need a fearless opposition, the opposition also should come into the field with clean hands. Do you feel that the opposition also does not have clean hands, because of which they have become fundamentally and institutionally weak, which has led to the onus coming on to the people to do it, because the opposition has failed?
Partially this is correct. If you analyze what you call as the success rates of various agitations, the agitations which have been purely apolitical have been more successful compared to the ones which have been handled by opposition parties. Now, why this happens? Because as you said, they would be having some negatives which the party in power uses the other agencies in their command to suppress their voices. And these people, because of their past baggages, have to smother down their voice. Whereas people can take it up in such a way that it results better. But there are also examples where I would take a case study of recent Govan happening, in which a retrograde policy planned by the government had to be done away with without any agitation or anything, because of a good governance by a governor. For example, during COVID, after the lockdown was declared, the Goa CM wanted to supply ration on door-to-door basis. When the lockdown was enforced by our Honorable Prime Minister, there was no notification to close down the shops. In Mumbai, during lockdown, I got stuck up in Bombay. There the shops were open up from 6 o'clock to midnight, extra time, so that people don't rush and don't mingle it too much. Whereas in Goa government had closed down the shops using police. This was a very retrograde step.
Correct.
And recently, Satyapal Malik has exposed that this was due to a crony who wanted to do business of this door-to-door supply of ration for profits.
Right.
This is what, and it was only because of anger in the media and the governor's reprimand is what stopped this retrograde policy from taking shape.
Okay. We'll take a quick break now and we'll come back on the other side. Thank you. Further, currently Goa is in the middle of, I would say, one or two major movements, and there are different issues that we've all taken up. One, of course, is the movement against the three linear projects, namely the double tracking, the Tamnar Power project, and the highway expansion. But in addition to that, there are so many other issues where different kinds of protests are going on. For instance, the fisher folk in Goa are extremely unhappy because of LED fishing and the fact that the fish catch is gone. They don't have subsidies. They don't have money to even repair their nets, and they are going through a big crisis. Farmers are going through the crisis of their own. Their farms are getting completely inundated by construction debris, and that is a huge issue. Of course, blatant conversion and manipulation of land rights have led to the complete urbanization of Goa. Unfortunately, the protests against that have not been so pronounced, but it's being felt at different levels. So when you see these kind of protests, and now elections around the corner, one party will go, one party will come, the same party might come back, whatever be the case. How do you see, when you've taken the protest up to a certain stage, how do you take it to the logical conclusion? My issue is, if a government does not kind of do the people's will, and they have such brute force at various levels, how do you keep it going and how do you sustain it? Because at the end of the day, if they refuse to do it, where do you get the energy from, or how do you plan further to do it? Because the farmers in Delhi, of course, they had one specific agenda. They would just not buckle down, and they sat. But how do you, in Goa, ensure that either the three linear projects are scrapped, or the major ports bill is amended to ensure that Goa does not become a state within a state and MPT becomes the big behemoth controlling? How do you achieve it? In the light of,
well, since the problem has come from the present government, the first thing that we need to attempt, and we surely have to do, is change this government. That will happen for sure. I am hopeful of that this government will be changed, because this government is no more the government of the people, by the people, for the people. It is for the crony capitalist, of the crony capitalist, and by the crony capitalist. So first thing I would say is change the government. Forget about the government, we are talking about the movement. Sustainability of this movement is becoming a problem. Now that the elections are also coming, once again the affiliations and oppositions are going to work once again. Right. And attempts are being made to create enmities between the activists themselves. Right. We have been put against each other. So if we want to go forward, the first thing that we as activists and we as people need to know that this is going to happen, and this is the attempt that the enemy is doing. So we need to be vigilant. As Stalin has already said, we need to be vigilant all the time, 24 hours 7. So vigilance is one thing. Secondly, we don't want to turn into terrorists. Yes, we are being forced to be violent. We are being forced to do little more. Little more would be more than the peace that you are showing. We are being peaceful. For so long we have been peaceful. We still want to be peaceful, and that mind has to be kept. Because the enemy wants us to be violent. They want us not to be peaceful. So that is where we need to be very careful, so that the movement sustains. The moment it goes to violent mode, the movement dies down.
Right. And that is not to be encouraged even.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now this is being done by them only. The people who are among us are being trained to say, "Arey, how long you are going to waste time? Come on, let's break it.
Right.
Let's
Tod ford.
gal uso gal, more forward." That is not going to happen. So actually, these are the ways where the movement is being broken. So we have to be very careful about that. Secondly, the entire state machinery is being used against us.
In what ways?
Now the police are for our protection. Just taking you back to 19 December 2020, where youth and children were picked up by police,
Yeah.
who were supposed to protect us.
Yeah.
Forget about us, the big ones. The small kids, the youth who have just come unarmed, you're just picking up them, picking them up and taking them for a ride.
Yeah.
So what the police
For the
is
benefit of
doing?
the viewers, can you just elaborate on what happened? We know, but
Well, on 19 December, the respected president was in Goa to celebrate the beginning of the 60th year of liberation. We were happy and we wanted to put forth our views before the president, and the youth set up a memorandum, sent it to the president's office. The memorandum that was sent and the request for a short time meet with the youth was received by the president's office. We received the reply also. Of course, the reply came on the day when the president came over here, and we accepted the reason that we were a bit late in applying, and so at that moment they could not. So fine. So the youth said, we will go to Panjim. The president is there.
Yeah.
We will go and we will also celebrate with the president. It is our 60th year.
also yes.
But before the youth could reach, even inside the Panjim city, there was a barricade, there was a police force that was waiting for us. We don't know how the news reached to them that the terrorists are coming. And in order for the protection of the president, the youth and the children were taken into the bus. Arey, what is this? So the entire state machinery called police was used against the youth and the children who have come to celebrate the Liberation Day, and that also considering or treating them as if they are the terrorists.
Yeah.
So that means the government was afraid. That is one thing that is happening, and the youth have been shouting, "Jab jab sarkar डरता है, पुलिस को आगे करता है."
Right.
And that has been done to us, that has been done to the youth, that has been done to the children. And that was a sad day, but they felt proud of themselves because they felt this is revolution. We are revolutionaries and we have been taken by the police.
Yeah.
Of course, we did nothing, but we have done something for our state, we have done something for our future, we have done something for the youth who are still silent, and they felt proud that they were given a free ride. So this way the machinery, state machinery is used against us. Police is just
But
one.
don't you think that acts against the government's larger interest? Because what happens is when the government alienates itself from the very people who elect them to power, in the long run, don't you think any government with some sense should understand this?
That they will understand only if they were wise. But the foolish cannot understand that, and the foolish will see the result of it, what happens in the coming elections.
One more question before I ask Stalin for his last comments, and then I'll sum it up. Now, the issue is now, at the end of the day, the political system consists of people, it consists of the system, and it consists of political parties. You can't do away with them because at the end of the day, it's political parties who make governance. Now, there are the critical issues of Goa that we've all touched upon in this particular debate. Do you feel that political parties are serious about solving these issues or giving justice to the people? We can talk about Mole, you can talk about coal, you can talk about fishermen's rights. Do you feel that political parties, I mean, since you don't want to take political parties' names, it's a general debate, but fundamentally speaking, do you feel that political parties are actually serious from the core of their hearts to solve
If
it?
I give you the answer right from my heart, I would say no. Because if they were serious, then they would have been with us when the movement had started. It is not that that movement has started yesterday just before the elections are declared. The movement had started when the problem began, right at the start of the pandemic. And from the start of the pandemic, we are there. And we were struggling, we were shouting, we were calling out. We were calling out to the political parties also. Of course, now they have come, but most of them have delayed, and the delay has been too big. If they had to come in earlier, which we were saying that we need a political answer, we need, it is not just the protest on the road, just street dancing is not going to help us, we need you to come in. That is the time they were fence-sitters, they were watching, they were just clapping at us, they were saying go ahead, we are there with you. but nobody was there. So now they are there. Of course, I see the political ambition, which I wouldn't say is bad. It is good for us also, at least because of that political ambition they are in.
Right.
But what I am demanding is, when you are in, see that you do it. And if you don't do it, then you will have it from us.
Right.
So the political parties, yes, they had to be more responsible. The opposition itself had to be more responsible, but mostly it has been that selfishness. We don't want to lose power. We don't want to lose the goodies. We don't want to fall into trouble. Our files are there somewhere.
Yes.
And all that has been kept by the present government by binding them in the chains of their own. They have the good style which our ex-CM head was very good at and still being used. So these political parties are still afraid, or the members of those parties who are in the legislature are very afraid because their files are there. Then they have to think once again. If you are coming in, come in as a Goan. That is the call that we had given when we had the Padyatra from Mole to Vasco.
Yes.
We had given a call to every Goan, irrespective of which party you belong to, whether you are police, whether you are whoever you are a Goan, come, walk with us. And many walked.
Yeah.
Stalin, just to, before we conclude, we're running out of time. See, you work with a lot of young people across the country, okay? And Video Volunteers does that. They all have their cameras, their editing systems and all that. And of course, they are fighting their own little battles in different villages and so on and so forth. Don't you think sometimes it's very important to have a balance between fighting for your rights and treating the entire state or the powers that be as your fundamental enemy? See, what happens is at the end of the day, it is certain people in governance who are anti-people. But don't you feel that if that people are, the young minds are not kind of controlled, we will have an India where people would think that anybody who's in power is bad and struggle and fight becomes a permanent thing. The issue, don't you think as teachers and trainers, it's very important to inculcate to young minds that look, you are protesting, but you are protesting for a country that you love. And for leaders who would do good for you. That doesn't mean that anybody who comes to power is necessarily a bad person or an enemy.
Absolutely.
So how do you strike that balance? You consciously do it.
We absolutely strike that balance. We in trainings, we would say that we protest or we disagree to bad policies and bad governance because we love the country. If I did not love the country, I would just go along with the cronies, no? If I wanted a quick buck and profit, I would just say, okay, let them destroy the environment, let them do whatever they want, violate CRZs and all the laws, and who cares? Because we care, we are out doing what we do. Our tools are different. We would encourage, if some people call us the mouthpiece of social movements, and I would say, yeah, so be it. If the established big media are the mouthpiece of capitalists in the country, then we are proud to be the mouthpiece of social movements. It is important. I mean, there is a blanket distrust on politicians. It is very sad. You were earlier asking, would you sort of say there is no hope on the politicians? That's a very sad situation. I mean, I would still say that there are people, and there should be people, and there are people who are interested in big pictures and policies.
Why don't more people from civil society come and actually join politics and get into
the system? Well, we have that.
Change the system if we have good people.
Absolutely, and that is happening.
Be on the ticket. Be on the ticket.
We have to be on the ticket, but here is the deal. A ticket, and TMC is doing this in Goa. They are trying to find people. AAP traditionally has that method of finding people who are good and whatever. They have their own methods of doing it. But here's a catch. Everybody wants a winning candidate. And in this country, and a lot of countries including America, a winning candidate means a person who can spend a lot of money. All parties across, a few years back, you'll remember, Sujoy, ADR, Association for Democratic Reforms, did a survey and asked all political parties that who amongst you are ready to declare your source of election funding. Every party said no, we don't want to. We don't know where the funds come from. Nobody wants, election funding reforms. Nobody wants to do the big picture thing, because if the politician comes to power, what is that person's vested interest? He wants to make enough money to have a next election round going. And therefore, you need to have big projects, right? You cannot have small projects to build a culvert on the river in your village, or to have 1,000 check dams that can increase the water tables in Goa. That's not money making. What is money making? A project that has 2,400 crores on one project. That 2% of that is a lot of money. 2% of 60,000 is nothing.
Highways,
expansions in 4 roads, those 4-lane highways in Tamil Nadu. I mean, these are all money. I'm not even debating the relevance of that project, whether those projects are needed or not, whether those projects will pass the environment impact assessment or not. I'm saying the design is that if I see a flyover, that is development. On one hand, people are responsible for that, for accepting that form of development. And on the other hand, we do not ask people, like new parties and all the parties, when they come for elections, they say, okay, we will revoke Mahadev agreement, great. You will discount the Moline project, great, fine. Talk about other things. Where does your funding come from? Will you be transparent in that? We don't ask big picture questions. We don't ask small picture questions in our panchayat meetings. I am part of the Moira panchayat, but there are no Gram Sabhas. Or is there a Gram Sabhas? 20 people show up. In a panchayat that has 1,800, 2,000 voters, 20 people show up in a Gram Sabha. I mean, we as citizens do not engage in political process. And we feel that engaging in political process is only standing for elections. No. Standing for elections is one thing. Engagement in political process is a lifelong thing. Otherwise, you will have what we have. We have an autocratic elected government. We elected an autocrat. And now we are saying, oh, the autocrat turned out to be bad. Right. But what if the autocrat had turned out to be the Singaporean dictator who made Singapore what it is today? We would be happy? We would have been happy. If Modi had not turned out the way he turned out and was a benevolent dictator, guess what? We would have been like very happy. We would have probably said, can we make this a system where we have presidential style election? Look at the elections now. We have a poster in Goa saying Maka Kejriwal Zai. That's our election. We have faces of individuals on the poster saying vote. It appears like Mamata Banerjee, Arvind Kejriwal and Narendra Modi are fighting to become the CM of Goa. That's what it appears to be. We have a personality based politics going on. That is all signs of decaying of democracy. This is, we should not discount this as branding techniques. These are signs. You remember how upset we were when people were wearing the Modi mask? We're like, my God, this is strange. Why are people wearing their mask? What's happening now? Why are we having Mamata Banerjee's face on the poster? That's not who we're voting for. She's not standing for elections here. Exactly what Modi did in Gujarat elections. If you hear his election speeches, it appeared like he was standing against Pervez Musharraf. Because he was speaking against Pervez Musharraf in a Gujarat state elections. I mean, these are all danger signals. We have to stop them and say, listen, I don't get this. You want good candidates? Give me the biodata of the good candidate. Right. And then we elect. So electoral reforms is also electoral education. Citizens get what they deserve. At the end of the day, if we have an autocratic government or a dictatorial person in power, that's because we deserve it. And movements like what we are talking about is what is the check. We should not look for sustainability of movements. Movements, protest will continue as far as democracy continues.
Great, we've had a great debate. Ajinma, do you want a quick 10 seconds to conclude? Since
what I would like to say is, see, all these things culminate from bad policy decisions. And these bad policy decisions are because top-down approach. Minister makes it and without the grassroots.
And that needs to change.
Absolutely.
The moment it becomes bottom-up, everything gets solved. That's the basic concept of that.
Well, we can go on and there'll be lots to talk. I'm sure we can go on for another 1 hour, but it's been an absolutely riveting and a fantastic discussion. I thank all my guests from the bottom of my heart for a very, very good opening point counterpoint as we restart Herald TV in its new avatar. We'll be back every week with interesting topics, discussions, panelists to keep this going. At the end of the day, as Stalin said, that we have no time to sleep, and let's throw sleep out of the window, so that we all work together, so that Goans lead a peaceful, happy and restful existence in the times to come. Thank you so much.